CFR Network, CFR News. Welcome back. Good day, good night, all. Shalom, Balanced Paradise. Have a returning guest, a lovely, wonderful, wisdom-filled young lady. Introduce yourself, actually. I won't do a grand introduction for you. Welcome to the broadcast. Introduce yourself, young lady.
Oh, bless. Thank you. So my name is Marsha. I'm based in Northeast England. And I'm young of heart and soul, but I turned 40 last week. So it was my
Congrats.
40th. Yeah, thank you. Beautiful day, beautiful week. I just was sitting in my blessings. But in terms of the work that I do, or what I feel is my purpose, my calling in life, it's all around fighting for social justice and dismantling white supremacy, however I can, wherever I can, using the skills that I've got. So I think we'll be talking about some aspects of that today. But yeah, thank you for having me back. I enjoy being on this radio show because it's different to, if you like, your mainstream, where you get your set questions and you have 20 minutes to talk about why is it important to have critical race theory in schools, and they give you 20 minutes.
I know. Thank you for highlighting that, because that's what many people don't understand, overstand, or even understand, the fact that this is a huge, complex matter, and it's very hard to get as much detail and points and information out in as mere 20 minutes.
Well, you can't, in 20 minutes, you can kind of introduce your name and say a couple of things, and then the time is done. So I respect, succinct speakers. If you can get your point across without going on and on and on, repeating yourself, I respect that. But there's something to be said, when you're not giving enough time to a topic that has been researched for centuries, and you want me to present it, warts and all, and dismantle it in 20 minutes. It's just not going to happen. So more time now, if somebody says to me, oh, and can you do that for us in 10 minutes? I say no. Go elsewhere.
It's impossible. I mean, I can give you like a rudimentary sort of introductory into the area, but as far as like giving some meat bones and some cereal and some drinks along with it, that's impossible.
Exactly. And to be honest, it's an insult. It shows really that you don't really want to look at this issue because you're not giving it the time. And I say this as well when I do I lead some anti-racism training, and the history always has to come into it. And if an organization approaches me and says, well, we don't really want to do that, we just want to talk about Black Lives Matter, because that has been something that's happened since last summer. I say to them, no, and you have to give it the full time. You have to give it 3-4 weeks, because this is something I've been studying my entire life, and I am still studying. So if you're not going to give it that, then I won't waste your time. You don't waste mine. Let's go. Because I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because I really want to make a difference. I want to see some change. Yeah. So you're not going to give it the proper time, and you want me to just focus on Black Lives Matter and that kind of hype, then let's not.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it seems that anything which I would deem pro-righteous has been sort of packaged under the umbrella of this BLM movement, which the ethos, as we discussed before, I am totally for, I'm totally for that. But in regards to the organization which they've created and stuff, no, not at all. I don't align myself with that.
Yeah, and there's people don't understand that, and that's partly due to our mainstream media. That they're deliberately doing this thing of anything at all. Like even the term woke has now become associated with Black Lives Matter. I mean, that it's all done by media. It's quite clever. I would say obvious, but quite clever, because it does work with the minds of the masses. To the point where you have people saying, Black Lives Matter is a Marxist movement, and they don't know what Marxism is.
No.
And that's clearly because they're parroting what they've heard in mainstream media. So as a principle, do Black Lives Matter? Yes. Do I understand why that needs to be said in a white supremacist system? Absolutely. But as an organization, no, I'm not a member of Black Lives Matter. I know people who are, and I have a lot of respect for some of those people, and I understand why they've joined in with that. But what it's being kind of co-opted into, how it's being used by white supremacy is
Yes.
mm,
It's and
mm.
when you bring these points up to certain people, they look at you like you've turned into a witch or a warlock. Like, how dare you? You can't say that. Where's the proof and evidence? And like, are you serious? Like, come on. I mean, we have the Ku Klux Klan who had very Christian principles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think I was just thinking there of like an example, but I think a really good example would be the work of Dr. King, of Martin Luther King. If you've only ever heard of the I Have a Dream speech and the no violence
Mhm.
stance that Dr. King took, then you don't actually know anything really about what Dr. King's work was. And I remember watching a documentary called From a Dream to a Nightmare. And
Yes.
it was Dr. King fully explaining the white supremacist system. He wasn't talking about integration.
Hmm.
He wasn't talking about, bus boycotts and sit-ins at food counters. He was talking about economic reparations. He was
Yes.
talking about the housing structure that had been left for people who had previously been enslaved. He was talking about the proper white supremacist system. And then I think he was assassinated about 2 weeks after that. So when people co-opt his work, and I've seen a
Yes.
lot of racists do this, say, Dr. King said we should all be judged by the
Content of
content
our
of our
character.
character. And what I'm loving, and that's what I'm seeing happening with Black Lives Matter, it's being co-opted in a similar kind of way. But what I'm loving is I follow Dr. King's daughter, and her Twitter name, I believe, is Bia King. I'm sure it's Bia King, but she is pulling people up left, right, and center who are using or misusing, deliberately misusing and manipulating her father's work and words for a racist agenda. And I'm
Excellent.
loving the fact that she's doing that, because you can't say something, you can't report. I can say something to somebody and they'll argue back with me, and then they might call me racist and say, "Oh, I've been on your page, and you're a Marxist too," or they come up with some of these things, but they can't say anything back to her. So they have to just,
Mm.
and more time they delete the tweet because they've made a huge, a huge mistake in
They're
co-opting his work.
totally, and they're driven by emotion rather than actually facts. Like,
Mhm.
facts are, you strip the emotion away, and we've got the actual facts there. Are you going to go with the fact, or are we going to be led by emotion and hearsay and what's good for today? Am I going to be part of this left movement, or am I going to, these labels and boxes that people love to jump inside of?
Yeah, I think it's because we are conditioned from birth to want to actually be in a box, um, and if there's no box there, we there's this idea that we are excluded. So where's our box? And
Mm,
wouldn't it just be great if we just thought, actually, there is no box for us. We can't be put into boxes.
mhm.
And that's kind of where intersectionality comes into, when we're talking about racism, and then you want to talk about, say, sexuality and racism as well. You don't fit neatly into a box of, if you're LGBTQI, you are then white. Do you see what I'm saying?
Of
You're
course
going
not.
to you have any kind of racial group that could identify as LGBTQI, and then you have homophobia, racism, sexism, all of that. So we don't fit nicely into boxes, but we are taught to want a box. It's really quite
Mm.
interesting.
It is the social programming which have been done, I would say, since the 30s/40s on up, but really intensified, I would say, in the 60s up to the 70s, 80s, 90s, and now it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They can literally put two or three words up on the screen, and that's it. They've got their trigger.
Mhm.
Whereas
Yeah.
before it would have to be over a year period, over 2 year period. Now the program is just that we as I use the term we, but we as society are so open to receive and take instructions. It's like we're almost programmable, living beings.
100%. I mean, if we just, I always say that we are, for as much as people love to brag about the greatness of Britain, in terms of our social infrastructures, our hospitals, our education,
Mhm.
our roads, these type of things, though there is great things, to be feeling a level of pride there,
Mm.
but we are also the most domesticated, tamed people ever. We have a current government where corruption has been proved time and time again,
Yes.
and we still sort of say, okay, then and carry on.
Yeah.
There's no, I feel like there's a lack of a backbone, and that is because we have been very well tamed, and we don't even realize it. I think that's,
Yeah. It's amazing to sit back and actually, examine it and look and think how, across the pond, people look at Britain as, the British, the Brits, that, they don't take no shit. They don't, they'll stand up for their rights. That wouldn't happen over in Britain, but
man, we're terrible. I mean, even if you look at the latest wave of protests, whether that be against vaccine, against masks, and then the reclaim the streets after Sarah Everard.
Oh gosh.
The organization that got given a great deal of attention was that Reclaim the Streets, and they were the ones who actually said, we've been advised not to go ahead with this, so we're not doing it. And it was other organizations that took up the helm, but it was just interesting that there was all this noise, and then people said, actually, we're not going to do that because we're not meant to. The establishment says we're not allowed to.
We were told not to protest, even though we've got, freedom of assembly and stuff. We'll listen to them. And another thing about that organization and that whole situation seemed very fishy with that young lady. Was it Emily something? There was a girl who was leading the she just sprung out of nowhere. Very new Twitter page. She was like the voice and was going on all of these this mornings and this, and we're going to do this, and this is why we're doing it. And then when she got arrested, it just looked so staged, man.
Oh, I think I might have seen, I don't know what the lady's name is, but I think I remember seeing somebody getting arrested.
Yes.
And that went sort of viral.
Viral,
yes.
Yeah. It just suited the agenda.
And then I've never heard anything about that since, about that particular young lady, what happened to her after her arrest, and nothing at all. So it is really interesting. Yeah. But we're a very tame, domesticated, because we're also, I think, in Britain, those of us that have something are so concerned that we may lose it if we misbehave, that we don't do it. We stay in our lane, and it's the lanes that have been created by establishment. It's disappointing, but at the same time, you do see brilliance, and you do see people not accepting that, and you look to them, I look to them people and think, good on you.
Definitely. Well, even on that point, are you seeing, especially through this lockdown, where people have been forced to deal with their own self and also be exposed to the woes of Black inferiority, quote unquote, and white supremacy, are you seeing more people actually making a little bit more conscious, critical thinking decisions kind of thing, and actually confronting certain things which they wouldn't have confronted before?
I have, yeah, and maybe that's because of the work that I do, but I definitely have. I've been having far more of what would have been classed as the difficult conversations with people, and the difference between, I suppose, is that they're listening more. I feel that there's this real desire to listen more. If I even take, because I'm sure I've said before, but and I did on the last show, but I come from a Black mixed family, so I do have white family members. I'm even having some more of those conversations with white family members, which did happen on a level, but now I suppose, I don't know, there's a greater, for example, one of my white family members used to say to me, I really don't like it when you say the white supremacist system, because and I said, I will keep saying that, though I don't like living in it, so I will keep saying it. There's been a shift in their attitude towards that term, from their understanding of seeing it as a white supremacist society is one that's ruled by the KKK. Their understanding that that's not correct, that's not how a white supremacist society works, and that it's far more insidious, that it's ruled by the people that look like them, if that
Yes.
makes sense, you know,
Yes.
and who can go into a space and talk about equality and talk about human rights, and yet in the background be working to keep this system going for their own benefit. They're beginning to get the insidious nature of that. Yeah. So I am starting to have some of those more interesting conversations, and especially with teachers. Much props to some of the teachers I've been working with. They're making me feel very excited for the future, for the young
Okay.
people that are going through the schools. Yeah.
And are you what are their turning points? What has made them confront that situation?
Social media has actually been a big thing
I thought
because,
you'd say that. Yeah.
yeah, because obviously at one time we only had mainstream,
Hmm.
and all the great, you know, all the greats. When I say the greats, you know, Malcolms and Angelas, all Marcus Garvey, all of the greats have always talked about the power of media. And at one time, and the time frame that you were referring to, is like 60s, 70s, 80s, the media was purely controlled by the state, by the
Yes.
establishment. They decided what was going on. They decided what was going to be discussed. Social media has done away with that. You know,
Mm.
people are being like this whole thing with Matt Hancock. No one wanted to see that film. I didn't want to see that video. I really didn't. It really bothered me. It caused the issue. But it, we didn't have social media to the lengths that we have now. Yes, it was going to still be exposed because, you know, there's reasons why it's going to be exposed. Distraction is possibly one of
Yes.
them. So yeah, it was going to be exposed. But there can't be the level of cover up. If it had been exposed just through mainstream media and there was no social media involvement,
Mm.
there would have been a level of cover up, a level of lessening lessening the impact of what he did,
Oh,
telling everyone they
definitely.
had to do too much. So it couldn't be done with social media. So I think there's been that, and people just talking more about race, and part of that has come from the murder of George Floyd. And I think the work of people like Kehinde Andrews as well,
Mm.
he's getting more recognition until, you know, I'm sometimes in awe at that man. I really am in awe because of the way that he just handles it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And he's so precise with his response that really you're gonna have to really know your stuff to be able to debate him. For me, there's no debate
Definitely.
there, but you know, for the others. So I think that people like him being given more of a platform and taking that platform um, has made a massive difference. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry as well. Prince Harry coming out and saying that his mother was hounded to death for being with a non-white person
Mm.
has kind of sent shockwaves through Britain. It
I
has.
don't know why though, Marsha. I mean, like, come on. Like we
Well, it
live
hasn't.
here.
I would say it hasn't maybe for black people, but for white people who really wanted to believe that the royal family are this kind of pinnacle of how
Yeah.
to be the
Hmm.
best of us, you know, born to rule.
Yeah.
I never believed that, you know, never from young. I've never understood why we have a royal family, and people call it tradition. Okay, but it's tradition that we pay for, that we
Yes.
then love them as above us. I don't get that. Why would we have such a thing? So I think, yeah, Prince Harry and Meghan. For all the people that don't like them, there's people that have had their eyes kind of opened.
I,
So
I
yeah,
have
social media.
I have a different experience in that respect. When I was young, I was super innocent. So I used to write to Princess Diana and Fergie and the Queen and all that shit, like pretty regularly, at least twice a year and stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it wasn't until obviously I got a bit of sense and actually, started to read books and stuff, and got to, I would say, early teens, and did I actually start to confront those questions like what clearly it was tradition, but like why is the tradition of this and how did they actually get into power? Where did they come from?
exactly,
Oh, they're of German
exactly.
descent. Okay.
Hmm.
Don't we
Hmm.
don't do we as British people dislike German people? And we've got a thing about France as well, like the xenophobic element of it. So you start to raise all these questions the older you get. So yeah.
Yeah, and the whole thing about the Queen being the head of empire, the head of countries that were colonized by
Yeah.
Britain, um, fed Britain in terms of profit, you know, brought so much money
Mm.
into Britain, and yet were starved themselves. Their lands destroyed and used for
Ravaged.
overproduction of crops. Yeah,
Hmm.
and let alone what happened to the people, because you know what we're talking about, what happened to the people is the next level. So for me, you know, the birthdays, honors list, all of that for me is pure distraction. And I don't understand, and I'm going to say this with respect and love, but this kind of thing, if I met this person, I would ask them the same question. David Olusoga, the historian David Olusoga, I have so much respect for that man and his work. It's, you know, I've read his books. I follow him on Twitter. You know, man speaks absolute sense, and he does get a lot of racist abuse as well. But how can you accept something with empire in the title? I don't understand that. If
Mm.
you know what empire was, which he does, and there's not just him, there's other people. I just think, how can you accept something with from the queen, from
I
the head
know.
of that empire, with the word empire in? It does not make any sense to me. Empire for me is all about murder. You know, people go, oh, but the railways, fuck the fucking railways. Who's to say that people wouldn't have got to the railways at some point anyway?
Mm.
It was about destruction, it was about control, it's
Yeah.
about fear. It created the concept of race, it
Mm.
underpinned colonialism, and we still have race now. So
Yeah.
how can we have anything positive with the word empire attached to it? Don't
And,
understand it at all.
and then they also, once they then, gave the illusion of the independence, in the 50s upwards, 60s upwards, and certain
Mhm.
islands and stuff, they installed the colonial mindset, which lives on today. The traditions, when
100,
we go to the court systems, how are they dressed? Exactly the
exactly.
same as how they dressed, all that pomp and ceremony. No.
Yep, exactly. And independence came with it. With independence, it's always in the like the little quotation marks, isn't it?
Mhm.
Came neo-colonialism.
Yes.
One Western European corporations and businesses had established themselves in certain countries on the African continent, so they could still get access to the palm oil, so
Hmm.
they could still get access to the cocoa and pay next to nothing for that production. Once that had been established, then independence was given. And so when people talk about aid, and this idea that, you know, Africa, and they still do this thing of Africa is a country, but that the
No.
African continent is unable to sustain itself because the African people are inherently backwards and inferior. It's because they have no knowledge of neocolonialism
Mm.
and what was done prior to independence.
Facts.
100%. And they need to really understand that. So when people talk about aid, Africa doesn't get any aid for what is taken out of the continent
Come on.
to prop up and support Western Europe, North America, straight up.
And then you'll get the knuckle draggers and offense given if the shoe fits, lace it up, who will go
Mhm.
on national television or talk to their mates in the pub and say, "Oh, I don't like the way where Britain's giving 30 million away to this place and they're giving it to Africa and India. We need to take care of what's going on at home. We've got
Yeah.
homeless people and to a point, in a roundabout way of sorts, that there is some truth in that. That there
Mhm.
needs to be some. There shouldn't be. Let's look at a utopian society and system. There would be no
Mhm.
homeless unless
Of course.
people chose to be homeless.
Mhm.
But because we've got
We-
systems in place that dictate, we've got class systems, we've got race systems, we've got all of these systems and structures in place which put people in boxes and categories. And if you don't
mhm.
flourish and fit into those, you are going to be put into that system and be systemized. So
Mhm.
it's as simple as that.
Do you know, it's really interesting because I've been trying to draw more and more parallels between oppressed peoples. Um, and by that, I mean oppressed peoples, whether that be due to your social class,
Hmm.
how much you earn, and then race on top of that. And again, there's an intersectionality because you can obviously be poor and black, poor and Bangladeshi, poor. So then you have racism as well as the classism. But I've
Yes.
been trying to draw these parallels to make it clear to people that and this brings us into the whole thing about what's come up with the government
Yeah.
and white working class, that title. You
Hmm.
know, it's really interesting. I read a paper by an academic called Ricky Allen, who is a white male based in the States. And he put it so simply in this, there's a lot of big academic words in this paper, but he put it so simply to say that the elite, the rich elite, never care about the white working class and so they need to use them for something. And that's the
Yes.
only time you'll hear the elite, and it's the same with the politicians in this country. The only time you'll hear them use the terms white working class is when they need to use, and part of the using is division. What happened from the pandemic and this whole we're all in it together, very quickly, but partly due to social media, people are recognizing we're not all in this together at all.
No.
There's the owners of big corporations going on their yachts, and while we're being told that we have to stay in our area, people begin to see that. And what it was creating is it's a consciousness of we are being treated one way, and those with the most money and power being treated another. Whenever that happens, the elite needs to come in and divide, and they need to do it quickly. So then you had this division attempt of if you support Black Lives Matter, you're a Marxist and you're against, and you're a communist, and all these other titles that go with it, Then now you have the white working class coming up, as in they are being left behind in education. And there's a couple of points. One is, I said, wouldn't it be interesting if the government actually did a report on the children of the generationally wealthy? So these are the children of people who have inherited money. I'm not talking worked hard for it in a meritocracy, which we're supposed to have.
Yes.
I'm talking about who've always had money. And we can trace these families back. We just have to really look at the enrollment list for Eton. We can trace these families back, right? So let's look at those children, which schools they go to, how much their families pay for them to go to these schools, which then colleges, universities they go to, and their first job, what they get paid in their first job after graduating. And let's do a report on that, and let's see if there is anything about nepotism within there. If there is something to be said about the more money that you have, the more contacts you have, the more opportunities you have. And why don't we then do a comparison of that against everybody else? Because then what you would see is that you're poor white, you're poor black, you're poor Asian, we're all together. We are all in this together. And it's the children of those people with the most money and power in this country that are not in it with us. So let's have a look at that, and then let's divide along those lines, because we'll see that we're in the majority. We're not in the minority. We're in the majority. We are the masses. They're in the minority, and they want things to stay the way that they always have been, with them having the most money and power. My second point is I was putting together a presentation for a school that I'm doing some work with, and I was looking at how the majority of white people in Britain lived at the time of John Hawkins' first slave voyage, which is what 1562.
Yes.
So I was looking at that, and it was really interesting because I already had an idea what I was going to find, and this is what I found. The majority of people in Britain at the time of John Hawkins' first voyage to enslave African people were living in poverty.
Yes.
And they were living, being oppressed by a minority, what you'd call the ruling elite.
Indeed.
At around the same time as John Hawkins, or just before them, the British population had grown from something like 2 million to 4 million. And historically, how people had lived is they could travel across Britain, farming the land. So people would live like hand to mouth. So you'd farm the land, you would grow what you needed, maybe a bit extra to sell, and that's how people lived. And then the state introduced what was called land enclosure laws, which essentially meant that the ruling class now owned this land that people had been farming historically, making their living. The ruling class now owned it. So you now had to work for them if you wanted. And some people couldn't afford to live, so they were pushed into towns. And then you had a law called, this is a true thing, called the Vagrancy
Act. Yes.
And you could be punished by death for begging. There you see the beginnings of a class system. So the poor whites were being divided by class, and at the same time the ruling elite were gaining from the beginnings of racialized enslavement, which of course was part funded. John Hawkins' first voyage was part funded by Queen Elizabeth. When you take all of that in, you can really see the people that were oppressing the poor whites then began oppressing African people. And then took that out. So let's have a look at this common ground. The people that were being oppressed and poor white, it wasn't being done on race. So there is a difference there, absolutely. We still have race now, and that continues to impact on people's life chances and opportunities. But let's look at who's historically, traditionally, always ruled, always gained, always managed to set the rules, and has never had to worry about buying bread or going to a food bank. They're a minority, and yet we are taught to divide amongst ourselves and fight each other. And that's the same with this latest thing on the white working class being left behind in schools. It's exactly the same thing. It's so that parents will then blame the Asian family or the Black
Yes.
family, and not those who are ensuring that white working class, because there's no such thing as white working class. There's poor, there's poverty. You can't
Yes.
separate it out into race, because there's poverty, and that affects people of all racial groups in this country.
A
So
hun-
even that term, white working class, is a problem.
it's a major problem. It's a major problem, as you say. It's another form of division. In the mid 90s, that took away the ability for parents to physically discipline their children. So we have, as a result, a couple of years later, we have, as we can see in the Gregorian year of 2021, a
Mhm,
plethora of feral kids, baby goats,
mhm,
running around this place causing havoc.
mhm,
And
mhm.
as
Yeah.
parents, because they don't have that physical backup to be able to say, wait a minute, no, you're going to hold these two punches or slaps or whatever it is because you've done something wrong. It's no, mom and dad, not even mom and dad, Sarah and John. Don't talk to me like that, because I can call up Childline, or I'll just call up the police now on you.
Mhm, mhm. There is. It's just because the because our education system is so selective. Um, you I think it's people, our children are being taught that there's only so much you can achieve if you come from a certain background.
Mhm.
And that's partly comes back to our domestication tamed thing of our population. We are taught that those that go to Eton are
Yes.
better placed to rule us. How does that work out? If they don't understand what a loaf of bread costs, or if
Mm.
they don't understand dole day, when people are queuing to get their money, or if they don't understand that people do literally wait until midnight for their money to go in and to go around
Yes.
and then buy baby formula, how are they the best placed people to rule us when that is something that happens to the majority? Um, and they are the minority. How are they best placed to rule us? It makes no sense to me. If they don't understand us, how can they rule us? How can they make decisions on our behalf?
You make a
It's
key
not going to happen,
point.
is it?
It's not computing because the whole reason for the system, as you know, Mademoiselle, is because the system isn't designed for us. The system is designed to extract as much of the physical essence from us, which then translates into fiat currency. So then,
Mhm,
the elite, the 0.1% and the
mhm.
1% can do what they need to do. That is it.
Exactly.
It's not for us. Govern our minds. Come on.
Yeah. And that really is kind of, I would say it's sort of obvious. It's not, it's hidden, what's that word? Obfuscated. It is hidden, but
Yes.
it, I also think there's a fear of, if we acknowledge this, we should do something about it. And I don't really want to. I don't want to lose my crumbs. We
Yes.
do get, people, I don't want to lose my slither of cake. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when really, and I keep saying this, we should be baking our own cake. But why are we even asking for a slice of that? We should be looking at how to bake our own cake, and that can be done through collective action. But there's
Hmm.
not, the divisions with class, the divisions with race,
Religion.
divisions even like with area, yeah, religion, even with area,
Mm.
like north and south, and yeah, it's just it's quite, yeah, it's quite interesting.
It's false evidence appearing real, manifesting physically in everyone's life. Oh, it's easy just to fall in. If I'm a woman, if I'm a 35-year-old woman, my position and role is to dress like a prostitute, and that's
Mhm,
that's considered to be like, okay, to
mhm,
be promiscuous, because that means I'm in control of my own body, and I can give it out to anybody I want on my terms. I'm going to
mhm,
have my own job. I'm not necessarily looking to settle down and procreate and actually have a family. I just want to have material things. I want to
mhm.
be stunting on the gram, and that's my ideal as a 35-year-old woman. And quite
Yeah,
similar for a 35-year-old man. There's no
yeah,
commitment. It's just about the touch, taste, and feel, and the aspects of how everything looks for that moment. Is this a Kodak moment or is it not?
yeah, absolutely. And I think you know, some of the videos that I see, like music videos, I was saying this, I can't remember who I was saying this to recently, a friend of mine. And I said, you know, back in the day in the 90s, and I'm not doing this thing of everything was great, you know, back then. Race, you know, racism, all of that was still it. But back in the 90s, when we had our R&B, it was about a man and a male and a female.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can talk there about the exclusion from LG. I'm not for LGBTQI. I totally respect that. Yeah, but it was two people together. It was loving. It was thinking. Now it's like, bring your friend, bring your grandma, bring your auntie, bring everyone, and we're all just gonna have some crazy party. And what, you know, I've been reading a book about Egyptian sexuality and spirituality, and for me, some of the teaching in that book should be taught to all of our young people, so they recognize when you have a sexual connection with somebody else, you carry their energy with you. So you do need to be mindful. You really do need to be mindful.
Marsha, please repeat that again. I've spoken about this so many times.
Yeah, man, for it, you need to be mindful about who you lay down with, who you share your body with, because when you have sex with somebody, you carry their sexual energy with you. And if you don't really know that person, don't really like that person, don't really have a lot of respect for that person, you are carrying that energy with you, and that impacts on you. And I think if that gets taught, it's something that I'm very happy to speak about with some of the young people that I work with that are older, about the importance of self-respect, understanding energy, understanding vibration, and working for your highest level of vibration. And that, frankly, it's not empowering to be able to give it up to everybody because everybody doesn't have good energy. Everybody is not on a high vibration. Many people are on a low vibration, which goes back to our domesticated, tamed thing.
Yes.
Where they're wanting, you know, like you just said, the material things, that's low vibration. All of that is very low vibration. If you're connecting with that, you're carrying that energy, it's impacting on your vibration. Straight up, yeah, man. It is. And these programs like Love Island and X on the Beach, you know, all I see is stank energy. That's I'm sorry. That's all I see.
It's facts.
Energy.
But
no matter how pretty the people are supposed, I mean, you know, I think they all look similar too, I've got to say. I think all the people on them shows look similar. And that's because the media is trying to,
because that look that they're trying to promote. But apparently, and this is news again, they're bringing on their first disabled person on Love Island. You know,
but Love Island shouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist. It's a disgusting program. You know, it is. It's all of that.
It's filth.
It's filth, and it. All I see is just stank, low vibration energy. I've never seen, as well as all, you know, the racism that's flushed through it. And so when people say, "Oh, we want our," this is the thing, right? Well, if we're asking for representation on certain shows such as that, why do we want to be represented on such a thing? You know, so
the mind baffles. I mean, I might sound a bit strange by saying this, but what if you like that concept and idea, create your own Love Island, and it's filled with Asian and Black contestants, and let them mix.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and don't set it up hoping to catch people having sex on camera, because you know that will create a little bit of a whirlwind for you in newspaper and media, because all it does is it keeps teaching people to cheapen sex and sexual energy. Like I say, it's sexual energy is really, really strong.
And
people
sacred.
Murder over stuff. It's sacred. People murder over it. People have gone to wars over it. It's exceptionally strong, and people should recognize the value of it, the value of themselves, and not be running around trying to get worth by sleeping with as many people. And I say that for men and women. I'm not, you know, saying it just for females.
It's the polarity. It's the yin and the yang. It takes two, but again, it affects both persons. In my humble opinion, as the feminine energy and physiologically is more of the receiver, it's more incumbent on them to make sure that they're keeping their vessel as spiritually and holistically as clean as possible.
I agree. I agree.
In
As the receiver, because females are penetrated,
mhm,
it is upon us to take, and that's actually though what makes us so powerful. If we recognize that power,
mhm.
that's what makes us really powerful. And I wish more women understood that power. I really do.
Sis, all it takes is maybe 10% of some strong women to hold out that little bit longer and be a bit more like take that stance. Like, no, this is the protocol. If you want to be
Mhm.
with me, this is how it's gonna go. All that wild stuff you're doing needs to stop immediately. You know, you need to settle down, and this is the program that we need to be with. Because let's not get it twisted. A man is doing all this wickedness and wildness for what? For
Mhm.
trinkets to impress women.
Yes,
It's as
exactly.
simple as that. So if women can say, look, okay, if I know you want this, but we got some conditions first. I'm not just gonna run
Mhm.
to you because you got the trinkets now. We're gonna have to look at this a little bit more closely.
100%. For me, I can see your energy. I really can. I'll tell you a story. Like a few years ago, I was in Jamaica, um, I'll say an acquaintance of mine because we no longer speak. And it was after this trip in Jamaica, um, and I was just, I'm not giving it up. I'm not feeling the energy of
Hmm.
any man that's talking to me, and they may be handsome. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they weren't good looking, but I am not giving it because I'm not feeling the energy. And she gave me this thing of, I don't know what you're waiting for, what you're saving yourself for, da 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 da. I'm like, I'm saving myself for me
Mm.
because I'm not feeling the energy of these men that are trying to talk. And she just and we ended up, stopping speaking after this because she just could not accept my choice. Um, and really, what I feel it was doing is I was forcing her to reflect on her own
Oh,
behavior.
that's it.
Yeah, and that was what was causing that. So what she wanted to see was me lower my vibration to meet hers, and I wasn't going to do that. And you can't even be friends with people, that these are not people that need to stay in your life. You don't have to hate on them, but they need to come out because they're not wanting the best for you. And if you want top tier vibration, you should always surround yourself with people and places and things that want the best for you and that are the best for you. So yeah, we stopped speaking after that because I just couldn't. So the whole time in Jamaica, Marsha got it on with no one.
She didn't have paradise and she had us.
Because I wasn't feeling no one's energy. But I'm yeah. This gets played in Birmingham, isn't it? So I think I'll be called to say this. But she had a situation with a man that was out there,
Uh-huh.
and the day was done, the night was done, what have you. Next morning, we're in the hotel room and we're talking. Her phone starts ringing. She answers it. It's the man's wife.
Right.
Saying, I found your number in my husband's phone.
Mm-mm.
We have 3 children. And then I'm looking at her thinking, now don't you feel like shit? You
Exactly.
know, and I know that it did got to her. She came back with some attitude because I think again to cover it up. But I
Yeah.
know that got to her, and I could tell that man's energy was off. I knew he was lying.
Mm. Well,
I
look,
mean, I have
man.
no women.
Look. Let me play righteous advocate of sorts, or let me just go back to my savage self and talk from a male's perspective.
Mhm.
Um, him there on the island, tourists that come over, that's free something and money. you know,
Yeah.
Ye- well, a lot of women, it's I don't know, man. I don't know. I think we, we we've got this kind of Shirley Valentine kind of mentality.
Um, but the thing is, I can say that would be the case, for some women.
Mm,
But uh, but that's almost like a romantic. There are, yeah, like the whole rent a dread, one two go
yes,
there type of thing.
yes.
There are some women that go with that kind of over romantic ideology. There are others that are going with the savage mentality. That you're talking about. They're going
Yeah.
with that mentality.
Hmm.
Um, it still is about, oh, really deep down, how is that making you feel?
I
How
know.
is that making you feel? And we don't listen to ourselves enough. We focus on distraction and anything but listening to ourselves.
Hmm.
What our inner self is telling us, what our spirit is telling us. Now I haven't been, sometimes I think when I come on here, I sound like a right preacher and that I've always lived my life perfect. I haven't. I've had my years of
Yes.
carrying on and not having love for self and not
Yes.
feeling good. I've had my years of that. So
Hmm.
now, that I've been through certain process where I've been working on my own ascension in
Hmm.
comparison to nobody else. I would like to share that with other people
Totally.
because it might click with them
Yeah.
and help them to be living a better life for themselves, not in comparison to anybody else and not in comparison to me.
Hmm.
So you feel good in the morning when you wake up, your energy is high, your vibration is high, you feel good in the morning.
But
Um,
this is the whole
mhm,
point of capturing the human experience and having these conversations, so people in their late teens or early 20s or maybe even 30s can listen to this and, well, trustfully in their teens or early 20s and get the
they will be
lessons
blessed.
earlier, rather than
Mm,
getting 10 years down the line, 4 kids. No, let me rephrase that. Sorry. I don't know how that slipped out. 4 children, and now kind of waking up to, this is all an illusion. Shit,
mm.
I need to fix up, kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's definitely not me coming from the angle of I've always thought like this. I've been on a process and a journey to get to this stage of thinking, and I'm still learning and I'm
Hmm.
still growing. But yeah, I think it is really important for me to state that because my life, in terms of connection to what my purpose, what I believe I'm here upon this earth,
Hmm.
changed the more I began to listen to myself and my own energy. And the more I began to do that, the more I could see other people's energy and read other people's energy. Doesn't mean that I go around thinking I'm better than other people. I can just see when people are working in a low vibration. And I don't want that in my space. I'm not going to invite that into my space. I won't have relationships with people in that space because they will have to bring you down. You can't bring anybody else's vibration up. You have to do it yourself. Has to be your own work. So if you get into a relationship with somebody who has a lower vibration than you, the only way that it can work is if you go down to meet them. And then you've undone the work. Explains why I'm single, B.
No, you build in self, man, and it's a continuous thing, and light attracts light, as I always say. And at some point, you might be rolling down the aisle at Tesco's or Waitrose, and Mr. Right there might be right there. You know what I mean? And
But
everything.
I wouldn't settle for anything other than that. So when I say it explains why I'm single, I don't say that in a place of sadness.
Mhm.
I say it from a thing of because it really does have to be top tier vibration. If
Yeah,
it's not
man.
going to be top tier vibration, I don't want it. I've
Yes.
settled before. I've been in a relationship where I've settled before,
Mhm.
and my personal growth was nil. It was nil. I just
That is key. That's key, Marsha,
mm,
because it's not about just two energies or two physical beings coming together to create one. It's how do we grow off each other? Like, I can say with hand on the heart that my Empress, if I didn't have my Empress in my life, I would be a totally different being. I'd probably
mm,
still be a savage. I would probably be in and out of the penitentiary, all kind of stupid shit. Yeah. So it's
mhm.
about, yeah, everything, it looks good. Yeah, that's gravy for now. What
For
about
now.
in 10, 15, 20? Most high willing, we're all going to see the minimum of 80
Yes.
winters, 80 autumns, 80 springs, and 80 summers. Like, are the titties still going to be upright, perky and shit? Hell no. It ain't going to be about that when you're them kind of age. It's going to be about, like, what's the conversation? Like, how have you been today? Like, I'm glad we took that trip. I'm glad we went there, or we did this together. Oh, remember when we was 30 and we was doing this, and that's what we're talking about.
Exactly 100. So I think and it's nice to be because most people that I know, and I swear I've said this before, I think on this in this discussion, but most people I know are in fake relationships that they're together for the entirely wrong reasons, and I can see that they're not growing. They're actually like dying, suffocating each other.
Hmm.
And it's so sad, and part of it is fear. People being so scared to be single
Hmm.
and listening to themselves and
Hmm.
working on themselves and doing that completely independent of somebody else. I will never be in a codependent relationship again. I have been in them, but
Hmm.
I will never be in a codependent relationship again, and that's what I set for myself. That's the standard I set for myself. So said potential partner will have to meet with that, definitely.
Oh, look, it's a balance, isn't it? It's that balance, and let me throw this spanner in that equation. You could meet the top tier Mr. All That, and everything is there 90, let's say 90% of the way. But the biggest thing is, as you've just mentioned, is the codependency thing. And for him, the biggest thing is he's a man, and he's a traditional man, and he's financially viable and able to sustain you, yourself, even your parents and all that there. But you're like, that's cool, but I still want my level of independence. How does that work, sis?
Sorry, can you hear me? Because I put on mute for a second because I've got the children running around the background. Can you still hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you repeat the question? I do apologize.
Don't worry. So for the last part of what you said, you meet Mr. Right. He meets all of the expectations, everything's there, but in his standpoint and in his ethos is he's the provider. He wants you to be his health mate of sorts. He doesn't want you to work. He wants to provide everything for you, and it can provide everything for you legitimately. How would that work in your current mindset?
That's not what I'm manifesting. You get me? See, like, I'm not manifesting a person that thinks like that. So I can't see that being, because that's not what I'm manifesting. I'm not putting energy or thought into a person who thinks like that. Some people want that in a relationship, and that's not good for them. But that's not what I'm manifesting, because I have a really clear purpose, and I must work towards it. You know, I haven't come into this life to not fulfill that purpose.
Yes.
And when I reflect on my experiences over the years, I recognize all of them are leading me to continue to work on my purpose and to grow to make that happen. So I'm not manifesting a person that would say that. That's how I'd answer that.
Okay, no, that's cool. Let me push you a little bit further then. So let me say that I agree, and of course, and that's just the wonders of individuality and humanity. Let me put a little bit more detail onto that then. So let me say that, yeah, he would still like you to enjoy your purpose and fulfill your purpose, but it's not about you financially getting recompense for it. So if you wanted to write books, if you wanted to still help, and mentor within the community, he's not saying you can't do that there. He's just saying, don't be striving for any kind of job where you need to get any money. If you want to go out there and do something, by all means, do that there.
But then I would think, then why would they need to say that? Do you know what I mean? Why would they say, don't be striving for a job, or you don't need to worry about working?
Finances, because financially there's no needs, because
Yeah.
you're all in a place. You've got your own homestead. You've even let's go one step further. Let me paint the picture, a vivid picture. You've got an acre and a half. You've got some sheep and some goats, some hens and all that there, and everything is everything. And you're able to go out into the city and do your work and fulfill your purpose.
But then if I was going out to the city and still doing my work and fulfilling my purpose, I would still be getting paid for it. I couldn't see why someone would say, or I wouldn't want you to. It would, that I couldn't be in a relationship where someone would say, I wouldn't want you to do anything, to be honest, say, I wouldn't want you to do anything. I'm doing what I'm going to do. And if I get paid for it, I get paid for it. So that wouldn't work for me either. That would, and same vice versa, I wouldn't like to feel that I was telling my partner, I don't want this and I don't want that. I would like there to be like a mutual understanding and respect, really. Yeah. Yes. And that's what I'm manifesting, to be honest. I'm not manifesting anything less than that.
And you hit, that's another key word, mutual respect. It's sometimes it's just too much of a war. No one wants to let in. Sometimes you've got to submit, you've got to acquiesce sometimes to let things progress and go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, that comes down to the right energy. The right energy, I think you naturally submit without it feeling like you're giving something up, or without it being painful, or you naturally submit, I think, with the right energy. that's the way I see it.
Most definitely. And to transition into the George Floyd, Rising Paradise, and
Yeah,
Dalian Atkinson, some parallels there. Obviously, thousands of miles separate the both of them and time
yeah,
frames, but it's interesting that we see the conviction of those two peace officers, or policy
yeah.
officers, I should say. Um, what are your thoughts on that, Mademoiselle?
So um, the white supremacist system is very, very good at manipulation. It has to be good at manipulation because it's always been able to manipulate, if you like, the image of Black individuals
Hmm.
so that we now automatically attach stereotypes to Black individuals.
Mm,
And you have to do the work so that you don't do that, so that you don't automatically attach stereotypes because it's so well embedded, it's so effective with the manipulation. And I remember when Nelson Mandela was released in South Africa,
hmm.
I remember the media whipping up the public, and I remember it in my own household, whipping up the public into this thing of, we've beaten apartheid, racism is ended in South Africa. Yeah, I know it. I want to laugh now myself, but I believed it, I believed it. And I watched the image. They had cameras in, every different angle as you
Yes.
walked from the prison
Yeah.
with Winnie and
Winnie.
all the
Yeah.
people, all of the Black African, South African people there. And you felt it. You felt that, and people were saying about the difference that had been made, and boycotting round trees and all
Yeah.
of this stuff. And then as I'm getting older, I'm meeting people from South Africa, and they're telling
Yeah.
me that apartheid still exists. It's just no
Yes.
longer legal. And then
Yes.
then you do a bit more study, and you see that, oh, the people that are actually making the most money in South Africa and the wealthiest people in South Africa are
Yeah.
white. Now,
Yes.
how's that? And then you go further, and and then you realize that
A
it was
PR stunt.
it was a PR stunt. And I see the same with the convictions for Derek Chauvin,
Hmm.
and for the police officer that killed Dalian Atkinson. Because now I haven't got the date. You might have the date of when Dalian Atkinson was murdered. But I believe
2016.
2016. So we're going back 5 years.
Hmm.
So it's taken 5 years to get to a conviction, and now it happens conveniently in the same year that Derek Chauvin is convicted. Now his conviction came fairly quick. It was
Yes.
within the judicial process, and obviously there was no way that he was not going to be convicted. It was filmed, but he still wasn't convicted of murder. It
No.
still wasn't the top charge that it could be.
It should have been aggravated.
100%, 100%. And we saw the same again with Dalian Atkinson. That wasn't filmed. 5 years later, a conviction happens. We haven't got the sentence yet, so we don't know.
Hmm.
The two individuals, the two police officers, are both saying that they were attacked, which is standard
Yeah.
for police to say when it comes to the death of a Black male in custody. They
Hmm.
feared for their life.
Of
Standard
course.
for white police to say in America as well. Standard,
Mm.
feared for their life, feared for their life. To the point where people really believe it. They really do believe it. They think that Black males are more violent than any other race,
Well,
males and racial groups.
Marsha, apparently, not even apparently, there was titles given to young Black males as super predators in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, yeah, super predators, and a lot of that as well associated with yardies. So
Hmm.
people that had locks were just automatically put into this bracket of properly dangerous. The most dangerous. Now I know quite a lot of Ras man.
Mm.
I couldn't get a more
Chilled.
positive vibration. Couldn't get
Yes.
it, in my experience. And of course, you would get some man that wouldn't be like that. But overall, in my experience, the majority have had that pure goodness vibe,
Hmm.
the earth preserving,
Yep.
looking after body, looking after self, looking after spirit, mind, so all the rest of it. So, yeah. So for me, this is just another trick of white supremacy. Now, prior to this conviction for Dalian Atkinson, I mean, I've lost count. I have lost count about how many Black males have died in police custody in
So
this
many.
country.
So many.
Um, if you
Kingsley
take
Burrell.
Kingsley Burrell, young man with mental health issues, we'll come on to Christopher Alder because that's really significant. But if we take David Olawale, who was killed by police, Liverpool, Manchester.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. But was it even Leeds? I think it even could have been Leeds, you know. I should know this off the top of my head, but it's gone for the moment. That man was harassed by those two police officers for years before he was eventually killed by them. For years, and we're going back in the 1960s here, for years and years he was harassed, to the point where he'd been beaten on one occasion that there was discussion around whether mental health issues had come, you know, brain damage had come as a result of a beating from this police officer. When it came finally to court, they threw rocks, you know, he fell into the river and drowned. When it came to court, the judge set the jury and said that they could not be tried for murder or manslaughter. They could only be tried for GBH or ABH, whichever one of them is the most serious. I always get them confused, right? So that was that was what the judge said. So the jury couldn't give a verdict.
Leeds, you're right, it was Leeds.
Thank you. So the jury couldn't give a verdict of conviction for manslaughter or murder, could not. Now, David Olawale's case was held up time and time again to say police officers have been convicted. They have been convicted of assault, well, of a person in their custody, but it wasn't the correct conviction. And when you look into the wider, if you look into the wider background of that story, the judge's ruling, etc., you can see white supremacy working at play. I think the officer got the maximum sentence was about 3 years, and someone has died. So now if we fast forward and we look at Christopher Alder, the case of Christopher Alder, a black man, a veteran who's fought on behalf of this country, dying in a police station in Hull. The CCTV footage showed police letting him die on the floor and choke to death on his vomit. Yeah. They made monkey noises and they laughed. When that case went to court, the monkey noises, the recordings of the monkey noises was removed.
Yes.
Who did that? That goes to show that we're talking about institutional, we're talking about structural racism, because it cannot be a few bad apples. It can't just be those 4 police officers that were involved in that. It can't be, because someone removed the noises of the monkey chanting, showing that it was racialized, that their behavior, their attitude, their treatment towards Christopher Alder was racialized. Someone removed that. So it wasn't played. So then we have the judge who makes the decision that none of those officers are to be charged. Then we have, I believe it was 2 or 3 of those officers retired, not long after Christopher Alder, and they got retired on full pension. Christopher Alder's family got £22,000 in compensation, and they were given the wrong body to bury for 10 years. Right. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about structural racism. It says to me, so that again, it moves away from this whole bad apples theory, which is completely incorrect. It shows that even the people in the morgue did not take the time to check. They gave them, the family, the body of a woman, of a black female. It was like they just saw some black skin and was like, oh yeah, it's that one.
Yeah.
Just hand it over to the family. So when it comes now to his sister, Janet Alder, fighting for justice for her brother, she has been treated in the same way that the Lawrence family were treated. She has been watched by police. She's been intimidated by police. And the police have been trying to build a case against her so that to damage her reputation.
Yes.
So that no one will support her as she goes forward trying to get justice for her brother. While we still have these things outstanding, for me, the verdict with Dalian Atkinson is not justice. It's not justice. It's not justice. So now what's going to happen from this is this case, Dalian Atkinson's case, will be used as police have been convicted, and it will undermine the need for convictions for those officers with Christopher Alder, but for all of the black youth, the black men, the black women who will suffer in this country due to institutional racism in the police, will undermine all of that reality. And that's the sad truth of it for me. It's a white supremacist ploy.
And I'm sure the CPS actually did a separate investigation in regards to the sound, the monkey chat sounds, and the laughter and stuff, and they came to the conclusion that it was very unprofessional, but they can't ascertain who was making the sounds at the time.
Who was making the sounds? Yeah. So for me, if that's the case, you can't ascertain it, then try all of them.
Exactly.
One of them will tell you who said what. So it's a farce to say, when the Sewell, I just call it the Sewell report now because it's not warranted that the other name is what was it? I don't even know, race who cares? The Sewell report, when that came out, and it came out with there's no evidence of institutional racism. Yeah. I knew that was going to sort of be the case, but I didn't expect it to be as bad as what it was. I really didn't.
And how much millions did that cost?
How much money? And that was another white supremacist ploy. Use your black and brown faces to deliver that news.
Yeah.
So now the black and brown faces can be used to say, but we did listen to the community. It was black and brown people that said it. That report was so bad. Even Boris Johnson distanced himself slightly. It's bad when your racist prime minister. Right. So when Sewell came out and said there was no institutional racism, my one question was, when institutional racism was identified by Lord Macpherson in 1999 in the Met, when it was identified, what did the Sewell team find that showed, how did the Met end it? It was identified in 1999. Lord Macpherson called it straight out. And we know that institutional racism mean at every level. Every level. So we're not talking just about on the street coppers, you couple of bad apples. We're talking your management, we're talking your senior officers, we're talking your administration, all of it. So what did the Met do to end that? I didn't see that in the report. I didn't see that at all.
No proposals.
No proposal. So what happened? What changed? What ended it? We did not get that answer. And the answer is because it's still there. And they know it is. Do you know what really disappointed me about the Sewell report? It's the lady that's the scientist, the STEM. My name's not doing great, peeps. If you can access Google it quickly, there was a STEM scientist who was involved, who was one of the researchers in the Sewell team. A lady, she'd had a very tough upbringing, dyslexic, I believe, as well, and has risen to become a great scientist. And her name has really escaped me. So if you could help me with the name. But I'll keep talking whilst you're doing that. I appreciate that. Thank you. So she was one of the people who was the researcher for the Sewell report. And then when the Sewell report came out, and you had your people with common sense, like your Hindi Andrew saying, a bunch of institutional racism deniers was hired to find evidence to deny institutional racism. He couldn't have been more correct. But she was one of the first people to be brought out, and I do call it wheeled out, to defend the report because they were getting trashed, rightly so. It was poorly written. Everything about it was just terrible. And she was saying, we didn't find any evidence of institutional racism. Now, I remember I used this lady. I had been using this lady as an example of a Black woman in STEM, in that field, as a role model for other young Black women. Now, in my research of her, so this was before she joined the Sewell team, in my research of her, she was asked to be a host on a television program with her knowledge of science. And she even said in an interview, so this is way before she did the Sewell report, she said in an interview that she'd had to face backlash from colleagues who basically said she'd only got that job as the host on the television program.
Oh, no.
Because she was a Black woman. And she said, she had to basically fight. She described institutional racism in that interview. So, and that was back in, it was about 2015
Marsha?
or 2014. Yeah. Yeah, so when, talking about the Sewell report is another example of distraction and manipulation by white supremacy. So you use Black and brown faces to deny racism And what that means is everybody then says, oh, see, it wasn't even white people that said it, it's black and brown people. So racism really can't be a thing other than the blatant, the name calling. There's no such thing as structural racism. There's no systems of disadvantage based on race, which we know is not the case. But of course, the Sewell report, we're always going to find that. And I've said before, but still, when that report was released, the amount of people that came forward and said, my name's in there, I wasn't consulted, I wasn't asked, I wasn't told that my research, I think it was the British Medical Association said that some of the data used in the Sewell report was completely out of date.
Wow.
And that they'd used data that obviously worked towards, it was confirmation bias. It worked towards saying that institutional racism didn't exist. But what disappointed me the most is that there was a lady who was one of the researchers on the Sewell team, Dr. Maggie Aderin-Pocock, and I use her story to inspire young Black women into STEM, because she's a scientist, she's a space scientist, dyslexia, has overcome barriers, and as a Black woman as well, to get to that position is really inspiring. So I've used her story previously. And then to see her as one of the researchers, one, that was really disappointing, but she was one of the first people wheeled out. And I always say it's the wheeled out term, because you are being wheeled out because you're being used for the white supremacist system. They're wheeling you out and they'll wheel you back again. She was one of the people that was wheeled out to defend the report after the huge backlash about how terrible it was, how the data was out of date, that people had been cited that weren't even aware that they were in the report, all types of terrible things, cherry picking information. It was terrible. It was worse than my first dissertation. It really was. She came out and she said, she was defending the report and their findings. And I remember she was, in 2015, she did a newspaper article, so way before Sewell report, where she'd said that she'd been hired to be a co-host on Sky at night. And she had to cope with colleagues saying the only reason why she got that job is political correctness, because they needed a Black face to fill that position. And she said, all my qualifications were ignored and all they saw was my skin color. So what she described in that interview was institutional racism. She described structural racism. And so I did a tweet after she'd come out and defended the Sewell report and their findings, saying, so what magically changed for you, Dr. Maggie, from when you did this interview where you clearly describe structural racism, to now 2021, you're saying that you can't find any evidence of it. So, so the Sewell, all these forms of, so Sewell comes out, there's no institutional racism. The officers are convicted in the case of Dalian, Atkinson. These are all distraction. All of it is distraction to continue the system as it is, to protect the status quo. There's never been any real attempt by a government to fully address and dismantle structural racism.
Because it pays in every element, in every aspect. They get paid financially if something's brought to the attention and the media. The social sort of climate is the fact that, look, we need to do something about this. So they'll parade something out, and then in the means of doing that, the media gets paid and sell more papers. The lawyers, the solicitors, the barristers, the prison guard. Everyone is in it to make money.
100. Do you know that's interesting that you mentioned the lawyers and the barristers, right? If we shifted it and had it so it was like a 50-50, so 50% of lawyers and barristers were Black or brown, I guarantee something would be done about structural racism then, because the one people getting paid, because the majority of lawyers and barristers in this country are white. Now you could say, well, that makes sense because it's a majority white country. Yes, but it's disproportionate, isn't it? We don't have it reflected in terms of numbers for Black and Asian. So then you would see something being done about it. And I think as well, it goes the same for the education system. The majority of teachers in this country are white or racialized as white.
And female.
And female, absolutely. And I've been blessed to work with some amazing teachers who have been very honest and said, you know, they have been taught from a young age, you don't talk about race. And so there's a stark, and I've read a few academic papers about how white children are taught to be colorblind. It's colorblind and color mute. So you don't talk about it. They learn that from a really young age, whereas it's the direct opposite, really, for the majority of Black and brown people in this country. We have to talk about it because something's going to happen. And that can often be our first understanding of racism, can often be through the blatant, you know, a name being called at you, and then you realize that the knowledge of the structural can take longer depending on your influencers and who is supporting your education, you know, in your family structure. But it comes through, and eventually you then begin to see it as a whole system. But from being young, we have to recognize what racism is and talk about it. Whereas in so many white households, it's the direct opposite. That just doesn't happen. So obviously by the time they've got to adulthood, that's truly embedded. And then the thought of talking about race creates
anxiety, and oh no, we can't talk about that. You know, that's a taboo topic, that is.
And then you've got your Kemi Badenochs, you know, saying things like, if you talk about white privilege in schools, you are breaking the law. If you teach a fact, you are breaking the law. And you're just like, Kemi, you're another one as well. I'm sure you're getting some props for this, and you know, I get that, but you've come from, she doesn't understand what it's like to grow up on a council estate my end or a council estate your end. She's come from money in Nigeria.
Yes.
And you know, there's an interesting history there in itself. But when Kemi comes out and says things like that, it actually adds to white anxiety. People get even more scared to talk about it. She then talks about this thing of critical race theory being about inducing guilt or shame. I've never, ever, and I don't know many people who do teaching in this field where, you know, it's around dismantling white supremacy and looking at the concept of race, why it was created, why we still have it. I don't know anyone who goes into a classroom with students and says, right, everyone needs to say sorry to me, and turn to your Black classmates and say sorry to them as well. You know, that makes no sense.
No.
I'm fully aware that nobody in this country right now was alive when race was created and embedded. But everyone now in this country at this moment has a responsibility, if they want to see the end of the white supremacy system, to dismantle it. And if you break it down, a lot of people don't want to see it dismantled because it would mean the end of their privilege. It would mean the end of, and I do say white privilege, it would mean the end of being automatically considered for the job.
Oh yeah.
Do people really want to go down that route? And that's the question that we're asking.
That's the uncomfortable truth of the whole thing. People talk about, equality, you know, we got an Equality Act now, and this, and which was formerly the Disability Discrimination Act, and you know, everything's fine. Oh look, you know, if you're from the Caribbean, or if you're Asian, you know, you can marry white girls and stuff and white men, and there's no racism now. Oh, but when we actually look at real opportunities, and when we look at corporatization and jobs, and we look at the top echelons, who are brown and quote unquote Black people who are in positions of power?
100%. This is the case. Going back to the white working class children being left behind, we have more Black youth going to university now than any other time. But yet we still do not occupy proportionately in terms of numbers, senior manager roles, CEO roles. We still get paid less than our white counterparts on leaving university.
Yes.
So, you know, so we can say that, yes, more are going to university, but if it's not translating into equity outside of university in the job market, where, you know, obviously then it's going to affect the mortgage that you can get, the area that you can live in, the schools that you're attending. That's the system. And I think, so when Sewell came out with that, I wasn't surprised. I think I was surprised by how bad it was, though, like how badly it was written. And just, you know, and then watching Dr. Maggie's gone completely quiet about it now. Even Sewell kind of shut up a bit about it because, you know, there are sometimes I am really reluctant to use the word coon. And the reason why I'm reluctant to use it is because I believe that every one of us is at a different stage with our
Oh
understanding
yes,
of racism.
yes. Well,
So,
you can say at some in some circumstances you can say that people are willingly doing this. There are
and that is where you are a coon.
yeah.
So I wouldn't say, if you don't know, who Marcus Garvey is, I'm not going to
Mm,
turn around and say, oh, you coon,
yeah.
because at one time I didn't know who he was.
Mm,
I had to go off and do the research and stuff.
yes.
So I'm really conscious of that. So it's not about whether you know the dates of the Haitian Revolution. It's
Mm,
it's not it's not about that. It's about if you are consciously working for the white supremacist system,
mhm,
then you are a coon. Like
yes.
Candice Owens is for me a coon.
Mhm,
She knows that racism exists. She knows the foundation that racism is built on in America, and yet she continuously refutes it. And she does it for us to be a white appeaser, to get money,
money?
and
It
so on and so forth. And you know, I think I do. There's a way you just think about goodness, the children that she's going to have, and how she's going to see herself and stuff. And it's not even that there's always a correlation that these people always have a white partner, but Kemi Badenoch does.
mm,
Candice Owens does.
yeah.
And I think to myself, do you treat your children like they're above you because they have white heritage? Because that's the next big thing that's going to be a really big bloody problem. Um,
I think what they don't see themselves in their progeny. They see an evolution.
um, mm, yeah,
And
I
they know that the next stage of that, when they become a grandmother, that the progeny will then be 1/4 of black
yeah,
origin.
yeah. And seeing that as an absolute plus.
Yes.
Um, it's not, you know, your children are your children. You had children with you have children with, you love your children. It's not, it's if you put them in a position
Hmm.
of that they are superior on account of their white heritage. And when we've seen how that worked historically, since colonialism, since racialized slavery, it's created more division amongst people of African origin, because we will never be considered, I keep saying I'm black mixed. I will never be considered white based on my aesthetics. I
Yes.
don't look white.
Hmm.
I have Afro textured hair, all of these
Yes.
things. So I will never be considered white.
Hmm.
Um, so it's almost presented to me as if I should be grateful for my white heritage. I'm not fully black. I'm not fully inferior. There's some
Mm.
kind of hope for me based on white heritage, and that is a really big problem
It
that I
is.
see in your people. Do you know who Calvin Robinson is?
No, that name doesn't know.
Oh, you're blessed. You're blessed not to know that man. He's I don't identify as mixed race because it's a white supremacist created
Hmm.
term. I would either identify as black or black mixed, but black comes, I'm not using the term mixed race. So Calvin is a black mixed person. He definitely identifies as mixed race. I'm sure he'd like to say white mixed too, but he knows that the white won't have him. Um, so he's another, like a Kemi or a Candice, but he's more dangerous. And I'll tell you for why. Um, he regularly goes on, he attempted to debate Kahindi and it just didn't happen for him. It just didn't happen. No, Kelvin. That was way above what you were reaching there, son. But he regularly goes on things like Good Morning Britain
Is
and
he the
says how
guy?
much he
Has he
loves.
got glasses?
Yeah,
Okay, that
that one.
interesting character. Yes.
Yeah, interesting. And so he says things like he loves the royal family, the Queen's
Yes.
incredible. Churchill single-handedly won World War II. He blocks me after I'd sent him some. All I did, and again, I didn't call him a coon. I sent him some information explaining how when Jamaica was a British colony
Hmm.
and when racialized slavery still existed in Jamaica, how the white upper class or the white planters in Jamaica were looking at how they could use their black mixed children, the ones
Ah,
that they were happy to accept. So
yes.
what we need to understand is in Jamaica, the majority of black mixed children born to a white father were not free. They were not manumitted.
Hmm.
They were sold into slavery and given the status of their mothers. And that
Hmm.
was a deliberate thing because it meant that the white males could rape as much as they wanted without
Indeed.
facing any consequences.
Yes.
So then for the few that did want to recognize their children, um, their Black mixed children, they were very much taught, you are above your mother in terms of your enslaved mother. You are above your mother. Be grateful for your white heritage. That's the reason why you get to be free. That's the reason why you get an education. That's the reason why you get X, Y, and Z, all because of your white heritage. So they were taught to value and rate their white heritage. And it was discussed in Jamaica about how to make this group the buffer zone. So this protection layer between Black and white.
And white,
And
yes.
yeah, and there's a long history of that. So I said that to him and he just blocked me straight out. I was like, okay, you weren't ready, sorry.
Truth hurts. Or it's like, oh, I already know this, Marsha. Why are you sending this to me for?
Churchill still single-handedly won the war. Anyway, so this man here, now the reason why he is more of a problem than the Kemis and the Candices is, I suppose, because I can see the Kemis and the Candices are reaching for whiteness. They'll never have that, you know. They might have white partners, they'll have Black mixed children, but they're reaching for whiteness. And the moment, you know, they need to ensure that they toe that line and spout the white supremacist rhetoric. Otherwise, all of it will be taken from them straight away. Now, Calvin consistently uses his white family as an example to say that anyone can experience racism. And that's where it becomes problematic. He's using race, even though he says he hates identity politics. He consistently says, I'm mixed race, I'm mixed race, I'm mixed race. He then says, my white family have experienced racism. And then people go, oh, so he has loads of white followers. People go, oh, see, racism is two-way. So we do have reverse racism. You know, if you use that term, reverse racism, you're recognizing that racism can't be reversed.
But Marsha,
go on.
Let me ask you a question. Can so-called black people, can we be racist to white people, so-called white people?
Prejudice, absolutely, but not racist. There's no foundation, there's no structural basis.
Yeah.
We don't control the education system. And this is the thing, even back on the continent, we are not in full control of the education system. No. It still has its colonial elements. So no, I think it's impossible. So when Calvin uses that and says, my white family's experienced racism, he knows precisely what he's doing. He's doing that for a purpose. Now, I can absolutely 100% say that none of my white family have ever experienced racism at all. Mainly because, you know, you could say, oh, because we live in a majority white area, but also because they've never been in situations where they've been the only white in the room.
Indeed.
Never. They've never had that experience. I could, you know, that happens to me on a daily basis. I go into a shop, I'll be the only black person in the shop. I go to so many places, and I'm the only black person there, so it's normal for me. So Calvin is a really big problem, and this is, if I come back and we do another talk, I'd love to do some more about how black mixed people have been used by the white supremacist system to promote it and evolve it, and how black mixed people have resisted that and what's happened to them, the consequences of that, because the privilege that black mixed people are given, which ties in again to skin tone as well. But we've got to recognize that not all black mixed people are this brown color. You know, do you know what I mean? You can get very dark black mixed people who look black and have a different experience. But for I say that I look black mixed without a doubt for me. So that kind of coloring. So for those black mixed people that clearly look it, we get given privilege on account that we assimilate, on account that we reproduce the white supremacist system and accept our place within it. The moment that we don't do that, and if you look at people throughout history, black mixed people throughout history who resisted and denied and dismantled the white supremacist system, they have had that privilege removed quick. So unlike whiteness, where the privilege is given just on whiteness, black mixed people only get that privilege dependent on assimilation. So it's conditional. People like the Calvins are really milking it. The man's not even intelligent. I'm not even saying that to just horrible. He's not even intelligent, yet he is given how many platforms?
I know.
His nonsense. Whereas someone like myself, or if we take someone like Akala, who wouldn't do that, not given anywhere near the same level of platforms. Leanne, the one from Little Mix, I don't know her surname. Leanne somebody.
Okay, yeah.
that she recently did a program. She's mixed race in it, black mixed. She did a program about racism in the music industry.
Okay.
She wasn't the right person to do that.
I was
And
gonna.
I tell you for what. I tell you for why. Because when she went on X Factor and got put with Little Mix, when they got made into this little group, she's the only one that's visibly black. I don't know whether another one is mixed. I really don't know, but she visibly is. They were up against Misha B, who was a dark-skinned lady and a far better singer than all the Little Mix put
Yes.
together. Now, Talisa, whatever her, I don't care. She used colorism against Misha B, and she accused her on the before the voting opened of bullying her Little Mix, as she called them. Misha stood alone as a dark-skinned woman. We know how dark-skinned women are seen, aggressive, all of these other things. Stood alone on that stage. And meanwhile, the Little Mix, including Leanne, was sort of huddled in a little group, practically crying. Nothing was, you know what I mean? And Talisa's good. And you're bullying them and you're picking them. And then Misha B got kicked out. Not like as in from the vote. No one, people didn't vote for her. Talisa knew what she was doing because Misha B was the best singer and she wanted that off the show.
And
Now,
the
Leanne,
aesthetics of that as well, as you said, yeah.
now, Leanne, when she comes out and does this program now, did she return back to that moment and say, I recognize that Talisa used colorism to get Misha B kicked off that show? There was no, she didn't. So for me, until you do that reflection and recognize where you've privileged as a light-skinned person, and as a person that has white heritage, stood around whiteness, in an all-white girl group, then you are not the right person to be talking about racism in the music industry. So there's times when we need to recognize to shut up.
Most definitely. So in essence, what you're saying is it was just a veneer in regards to the topic. They didn't really touch it.
Yeah. Well, I think she just diminished it. She diminished it because she didn't fully uncover it. She didn't fully look at it. And like I said, that Misha B example is the perfect one. And there's a and the same with Rochelle Humes doing the documentary about the high numbers of Black women who die in childbirth in this country. She wasn't the right one to be doing it. It should have been a Black woman, possibly somebody who was touched by. And I remember there was a lady doing a lot of research who should have been doing that documentary, and for some reason that didn't happen. And then Rochelle gets put in. Rochelle does This Morning. She is a palatable Black mixed person. She has to keep the white population happy with what she says. Otherwise, she can't go on This Morning and do your morning TV and smiley and hi. She can't do that. So, yeah.
It's interesting to say the least. For some of the listeners who pardon self, who don't have as much contextuality in regards to the football we were discussing, Mr. Atkinson, Rising Paradise. He was a former Aston Villa football player who went to his father's house in Telford. For some strange reason, the police were called or something, and they were trying to say that he was trying to burglarize his father's property. PC Benjamin Monk tasered him for 33 seconds, more than 5 times longer than the standard length, and kicked him in his head at least twice as he lay stunned on the ground.
Yes, that's right. And then he died of a cardiac arrest.
Yes, indeed.
And the other officer that was with PC Benjamin Monk was his partner as well, his girlfriend. So you can't tell me that there wasn't a discussion about what story was going to be said there. And if you taser someone for 33 seconds and it's 5 times above, and I read what he'd said in the newspapers about how he hadn't been aware how long he tased him for, and he also couldn't remember kicking him in the head, which is quite striking really for a police officer. You really should, be aware of your conduct because of the responsibility level that you have. It's quite striking really that he can say that. And then again, this is not murder. He's not been convicted of murder.
Manslaughter.
Why not? Why has he not been convicted of murder?
It highlights again what we've been discussing. This whole system.
It's a distraction. So even like I say, in a few years' time, maybe even 6 months' time, a young Black man, and I say Black men consistently. I know that Black women are massively affected by racism in the police. I'm not saying that they're not. When it comes to the physical altercation and abuse, it's Black men that are the target. So say in 6 months' time, another young Black man, something happens to them in custody. Another young Black man is going to die in police custody. I'd like to say otherwise, we know that's not the case. When people then talk up and maybe Black Lives Matter gets mentioned, some more protests may happen, people may, walk and make noise, they will say, well, in this case, justice was done for Dalian Atkinson. Justice was done. We know that a few bad apples can be racist in the police, but it's not a system. It's not a racist system that works and targets Black males. And it will be used to quiet our voices, to diminish the reality of structural racism, to allow that system to go on as usual. And we need to be really, really mindful of that. This is not a victory in the same way that Nelson Mandela being released from prison was not the end of apartheid.
Definitely. As a community, we need to be really coming together and number one, going back to the old days of sorts of having a real community, getting to know neighbors and stuff and having more influence and affecting young people's lives. Because at the moment, if we're going to continue down this route, with only a few people holding a bit of knowledge and trying to do something proactive, we're just going to be chasing our tail, and we're only going to be affecting, it's not going to be the each one teach 12 mantra, which I've been pushing for years. It's going to be literally the old school, each one teach one.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing though, with social media, we don't need to be doing it on that level anymore, but we need to be wise about how we're using our social media, because yes, you can get, I had, again, an acquaintance say to me, you post all the time about white supremacy and this, that, and the other, and this, that, and your posts don't get loads of likes. I'm like, oh, what? I'm not doing it for likes. I'm doing it for the awakening. And if somebody doesn't like it, but they sit and they stare at it, and they let the words digest and absorb into their mind, who knows? 2 months, 3 months, 1 year later, something can happen where it's like, I get this now, and this is how I'm going to do it. So we need to be more mindful of how we use our social media. Don't play into the stereotype. You will get more likes if you've got 10 girls twerking on your video. You will then talking about, the reality of racism and what that means and how it affects our life chances. But which one is beneficial for humanity? Which one is beneficial for our people? It's about making those kind of choices.
Oh, definitely. We've all got to play a part in this game we call, quote unquote, game we call life. The big question is, are you just going to be a bystander, just watching this here from the seats, or are you going to participate and actually have an effect on how our world, this plane of existence, is going to be sort of manifested?
Exactly.
And on that note, Mademoiselle, I've kept you a lot. I know you've got things to do and all that. It's been another wonderful and insightful conversation. Please do share your Twitter information. I'm pretty sure people are going to be dying to see your Twitter feed now.
It is, my Twitter name is @M for mother, C for cat, G for golf. So that's MCG and then 1981. That's just my. Or if you wanted to put my name into Twitter, I think it brings up that handle. So it's Marsha, Marsha, Garratt, Garratt. And thank you very much. It's been blessed again. It's very. I really enjoy these discussions. They have a different format, which works nicely for me. So thank you.
You're most welcome. Every time, and as I say, we've got to do the best we can do. We've got to have these conversations. There's no big U's and little I's. We're all one in essence. If we're about culture, freedom and righteousness, let's get it. Let's manifest it. We can do it. It's nothing but an action. We think it, and then we do it.
Exactly. I'm with you, man.
Definitely. I'll make sure I put the Links below in the description. Make sure you comment, subscribe, share, and tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a sister, you know, to jump on this train, man. We're picking up
Share the
speed.
love.
Yeah, man. Share it. Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Thank you again for your time, mademoiselle. And for the part 3, we'll definitely go into the co-option and acceptance of that class. Yes.
Most definitely. Most definitely. I look forward to that. I look forward to it.
Take care.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.